Hey folks, first of all, thank you for joining, and my apologies for not being able to record on my usual preferred webcam. Having a few computer issues, but as I promised, I'm going to be coming consistently, every week. A little bit behind, but going to keep my word, and I'm going to bring that content rapid fire. Um, and as I promised, this week I wanted to talk about one of the heavy influences in my life as it pertains to music and performance in general. And that is none other than the great Miles Davis, who you see in the thumbnail, with him playing along one of his former, colleagues and musicians, Mr. Bill Evans, famous pianist, who started off with Miles Davis and became very famous as a solo piano composer in the jazz genre in the course of the 60s and 70s for quite a few years. Um, so without further ado, I really want to talk about Miles Davis. He's been on my heart and he's been on my mind a lot these past few weeks. Miles Davis was a man of great and legendary talent. He coursed over many decades of music as a primary artist, as a composer, as a performer of the trumpet. Miles Davis was born in America, and he had a pretty, um, I would say, good upbringing, a good childhood, being raised by a family of influence, a family of leadership and dynamic characteristics. Particularly, his father was a doctor in Chicago. So Miles Davis had a lot going for him. He had a lot of, I guess you could say, privilege, and he had a lot of people looking up to him in his community. But beyond that, Miles Davis was very independent. He knew from an early age that he wanted to entertain, and he also knew that he had a calling for music. I guess, obviously being from Chicago, where the jazz scene manifested itself preemptively, and in the course of allowing the minority community, Black Americans, to perform in these desegregated venues, Mr. Miles Davis made his impression upon the larger community, and therefore he was selected to go to school in New York. He went to Juilliard. Um, so one thing you will notice that I focus on my channel is confidence and meditation and the idea of being self-motivated, intrinsically self-motivated. Um, and I just can't really think of any better example than Mr. Davis, uh, being that, there was so much, um, upheaval and battle and lack of awareness going on amongst the United States citizens at the time, and, battles between the different demographics, of course, but also just a division between ideology and, you know, the state of awareness, the consciousness, the ethos, if you will, of the country, the emotional kind of state. I mentioned this a little bit last week, or I'm sorry, about 2 weeks ago when I was talking about August 28th and what that day means to the civil rights struggle. Um, so one of the main things I want to focus on Miles Davis is I'm going to drop the link, and I promise I'll keep this video short. Um, because I'm probably going to be talking about Miles Davis for a few weeks now, because of course his life was so compelling, and he had a lot going on in the course of his 65 years of living. Um, but more so, his life spanned so much change from being starting off as an early musician in early jazz musician in the bebop era, coming out of traditional original jazz, if you will, or swing jazz, right? That was so popular during uh, World War II, right? Was infamously known um, show bands, right? That took place um, throughout the wartime, if you will. We call it wartime, right? And that was probably the one thing that we had going on in America was the show bands, right? That were basically getting everyone away out of that mind state of losing people, losing soldiers, losing family members, getting those stories back constantly, throughout World War II. So, you know, what I'm pointing out is that there was a need for entertainment. There was a need for showcasing, performing, and the education and implementation of that on a larger scale throughout the United States. And of course, we know about Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, right? But what we really don't talk about a lot, and I've been doing some reading on this as it pertains to Miles Davis' life and how he continued to push that as a music genre, basically his whole life. Um, it's a topic that we need to discuss more. So anyway, like I said, I'm going to be unfolding this topic because it is a heavy topic. There's many ways that I can explore this. I can explore it from an international perspective. I can explore it from a musical perspective, political perspective, right? Miles Davis was prominently um, almost absent from the civil rights movement, but he was so much involved with the everyday struggle, right? When you think about him going to Europe um, quite a few times and getting into trouble with the law, and although he was still known uh, heavily throughout the world, he was still affected by racism. He was still affected by discrimination and specifically police brutality. He's a man who probably had probably the first um, features to his music and his film, right? Not just here in the United States, but in the world, right? I'm going to drop a link to that as well too, because it's a really great composition to the film called Elevator to the Gallows. I'm translating it out of the French original name that it has, but it's extraordinary. It really is, because what he did with those musicians, where they composed the music completely through improvisation, right? Completely unscored, unwritten, and basically just creating instrumental music to the movie. Because you have to remember, we were just getting out of silent films, right? In the 40s, 30s, right? Which is, I think that movie was made in like the 50s, right? So, what Miles Davis did was, as it pertains to movies and scores and live performance, was unique, for better lack of words, and one of a kind, because he basically broke the glass ceiling, right, as you say. He opened the doors for so many musicians, including John Coltrane, right, Herbie Hancock, who both came out of the great works and, creativity of Mr. Miles Davis. One thing I really want to leave you all with today other than, um, sharing with you what Miles Davis did for this country as an African American man coming out of, you know, segregation, right, was his ability to maneuver through the arts, right? I talked about this in one of my other videos that he wasn't a visual artist, and he put and he combined his art, his physical art, in such a way to help him give impression through his music. I don't really focus a lot on the theory on my channel, but more so what musical interpretations or musicianship and musicality can do for your well-being. But I will say that um, Mr. Davis pushed traditional theories with his um, modal sequences and the way he composed melodies, right? Or the way he basically put other instruments um, with his instrument of choice, the trumpet, to make very unique um, interpretations of jazz that almost were out of the traditional genre or category, right? I'm obviously, for those musicians who are listening, know that I'm speaking of fusion jazz, right? Which is, it's almost like rock combined with jazz, right? But very exploratory, right, is the word, and very out of bounds, right, if you will, to where it pushed all the way into the music that we see today. Our more famously known um, soft jazz, or smooth jazz, right, where it basically was almost a recap of R&B from fusion, which was combined with rock and avant-garde, almost extreme effects to really just draw you into listening. So, like I said, there's so much I can say about mine. And first of all, just the psychology, let alone what he did to music, right? In the span of 50 years, right? 40, 50 years. From bebop to, classic jazz to civil rights jazz, which is, you really won't find anybody talking about that. There is such thing as jazz that was composed, or music that was composed to addendum the civil rights struggle. Um, to show jazz, right? Big band, even Duke Ellington. I mentioned Duke Ellington, or I mentioned show bands that were coming out of the World War II era. Those went on well into the 70s, right? Even today, they go on today, till today, where, by the way, that's how we keep a lot of classical traditions going too, knowing and understanding Beethoven and Mozart and Chopin, right? Like we can literally take all that stuff and bring it into a new form, right? Like R&B or rock or even pop music, right? Go back to my video on Beyonce, right, where I discuss how she uses extra musical energy and polystylism to get across and convey certain messages. Miles Davis started a lot of this, believe it or not. And I promise I'm going to drop that link for you all to listen to his film score, right, where he was leading the band and scored music for an entire film. I read a lot. I share with you guys that I read a lot. And I promise I won't drop books every week and have you guys feel like you have to read them all. I'm not trying to come off as a know-it-all or super scholar or anything like that. But I do love to read and I love to explore the different traditions of life and psychology of life, if you will. Carl Jung, right? Many in the education world, as we say, are familiar with this man. He's a famous psychiatrist as well, that was taught by another famous psychologist and psychiatrist. You can see the overlaps right there between who he's been taught by who and who's brought down who, right? You know, you, you can almost, by the way, Carl Jung, like I said, he was taught by a famous, almost infamously known psychiatrist named Sigmund Freud, right? And, you know, he comes up with psychoanalysis and the theory of sexuality and whatnot. But his protege, he came up with an almost exact opposite of um, his, what Freud's work was proving, right? Which, you know, we were all driven by our kind of lower senses, right? But what Carl Jung stated was it was more deeper than that. It's more of a psychology and mysticism that we are unfamiliar with, and that it takes a lot of time and training to understand. He called it the shadow of psychology, if you will, the shadow of psychology. And the more I think about Miles Davis, right, as a musician, and his deliberate effects on the jazz world and uh, desegregation into the mainstream cultures, right, and also international um, relations. I think about Carl Jung and the shadow psychology and what he was saying that were our true drives, impulses, and motivations, right? I think I cannot help but to put Miles Davis in the category of a interpreter or psychologist, if you will, because you know, especially when you think about what he went through, right? Um, with all of his accolades, he was basically still trapped into experiences that did not separate him as the premier musician that he was. So he was always in his own head, basically. Um, there's a famous quote in here that I'm thinking of. But Carl Jung, he talks a lot about music. He talks about how music is really hard to understand, and it's almost like a code for our life. And I think about Miles Davis' impressionism and improvisation, and how the mainstream categorically channels that awareness or communication of music to the mainstream, and how we attach ourselves to that. You cannot help but think that, um, you know, this man was more deliberate, a little bit more deliberate than what we may have suspected him to be. I will probably, I'm gonna have to find that quote. And this is such a short book too. And this book deals a lot with the sciences of mystery systems, if you will, and how we interpret them into human psychology. Okay. Since the normal fantasies of a child are nothing other at bottom than the imagination born of the instinctive impulses, and may thus be regarded as preliminary exercises in the use of future conscious activities, it follows that the fantasies of the neurotic, even though pathologically altered and perhaps perverted by the regression of energy, contain a core of normal instinct, the hallmark of which is adaptiveness. Okay? So basically, what Carl is saying right there is that our drives and our inner impulses are not just outside factors that are manifesting themselves. They are part of a greater dynamic in psychology that helps develop us as human beings and continue our our shared um, developmental factors, if you will. That's what we mean by imagination. How do we communicate? How do we interpret our own analysis? And Miles Davis was extraordinary with that, beyond extraordinary with that, because we still recognize today. I'm going to keep this video short, coming up on the 20 minutes. I know I've been kind of mouthing off, but I bring content to you all every week, not just because I'm trying to get clicks and likes and create the most entertaining or flashy techniques on YouTube. I'm bringing you guys the real deal. Nobody's going to be talking about this stuff. And I'm not going to shy away from talking about it because I see others aren't talking about it. This is important, heavy stuff that brings people together. People of all different backgrounds, right? Um, so there's no false comparisons or competition that I'm seeking after. What I'm looking at is who is going to be involved with understanding and trying to push forward with the truth, right? Um, we can't distort that because we have great risks in doing that. And that is the risk of not clearly being able to communicate the history, communicate the sacrifices that particular individuals made, despite their personality. Now, I'll end by saying I know Miles Davis wasn't the most influential personality by his charisma. That's not the point of this. The point is showing that um, he did what he had to do to make his way of life, to make meaning to me, right? So as my gardeners start doing all that, I'll just end by saying I appreciate you all. Continue to build up my channel, and I hope that you all can share, like, and support me in whatever capacity you can. Um, but I'm here for the real deal, and it starts right now, right here, recognizing who has made those sacrifices, and of course supporting those who want to continue that legacy and continue the truth. So thank you all, and I hope you all have a blessed day. Sorry for being late, and I'll get my computer fixed next week. Bye next week. Have a great day.